All right, guys, we are on day 21. Today is day 21 of Bible 365 with me, Kathy Carter, and we are continuing our time in Job. And so we have gone through just a couple of days of Job. And I say we, I mean me. I've gone through a couple of days of Job. And I was talking yesterday about some some of the difficulties of the task of going through Job. One, because it's not something that I've studied overwhelmingly, and two, because of the way in which it's written. It's people speaking, and so it's sort of like characters. I always kind of air quotes it's characters, which I believe these are real people. I don't necessarily think that this is a tale to be told just so people can believe, or just so, or this is actually people, and this is actually something that happened to real people, but it's conversational, and so it is just a little bit harder to poke through, and a little bit harder to not necessarily understand, but a little bit harder, I feel like, to convey some of those things. So before I start in Job, what I want to do is just go over what we are doing. And so this is Bible 365, which means it's 365 days of reading through your Bible from cover to cover. And I am doing a chronological reading. So I am reading from the 1 Year Chronological Bible or the 1 Year Chronological Bible plan. So if you don't want to buy a separate Bible, you can just download a plan. There's an online plan. So it's 1 Year Chronological Bible online.com, and you can look up their daily chronological reading plans, and it will guide you to a printout which will give you everything that you want or need to read day by day. So then we are in the same place. If you don't have that plan, or if you don't have that Bible, today we are on day 21, which is Job 8 through 11. So if you haven't read yet, I would love if you put this on pause, you go read, and then you come back. What I want from everyone who is reading this, obviously, my main goal in this is for everybody to be reading their Bible, to dust that thing off of your shelf, and to open it up and to read it with your own eyes, using your own brain. And then I would love if you then come and follow up with the videos, and just to see sort of, are we thinking a lot of the same thoughts? Was what you were reading, was it hard to understand? And maybe some of this can help you understand it. Or just because you are reading, I would love for you to comment along with me and to let me know that you are reading and what it is that you are reading, and if you're seeing different things than I'm seeing. And I've already had some of you guys commenting, which I think is amazing. I'm actually really excited about it. And I like following up because some people have different perspectives, so they can see things a little bit differently than I have seen them. And so I appreciate that they're viewing it, and they're viewing it in their lens, and they see something maybe slightly different than the way in which that I read it. So and maybe that would make a difference, and maybe it doesn't make a difference. Maybe it's a detail that doesn't change anything, but it is good to see that we as people can read things slightly differently, because this was actually written thousands of years ago, and we're just really trying to understand. And on top of that, it was written in the area that we're in was written in ancient Hebrew, and we don't read ancient Hebrew, and so it's been translated into English for us. And so even in the translations, there are some subtle differences that I hope and pray that don't make any difference in how we see God, but maybe they do make a difference in some of the small little details that we see. So in saying that, I want to move right on into Job. So again, we are in Job day 21. Keep reminding you, and it is Job 8 through 11. So what we have seen so far is that God has allowed Satan to test Job. I use the word test. God has allowed Satan to mess with Job. And for whatever reason that is, I'm not in the mind of God, but what I did see is I did see God asking Satan what he was doing. Satan said he was roaming the earth, and then God responds, "Hey, did you see my servant Job?" And he says, "My servant." That means somebody who's following him, somebody who loves him and honors him. And so he asked, Satan sort of said, "Yeah, I see him, but you're protecting him, so big deal." And then God essentially released some of that protection and allowed Satan to do a little bit of dirty work on the earth. And then, therefore, Job lost all of his goods, all of his belongings, and he also lost all of his family except for his wife. His wife, however, is essentially cursing God. And so immediately we see that he does not want to curse God. But I feel that in this section, he's taking a turn for the worse. So his friends have come to join him, and we have seen Eliphaz speak, and we have seen Job respond. And now we are going to see his second friend speak. So his second friend is responding to what Job has already said. So it's Bildad. Bildad is another one of his friends. And right away, in verse 2, he's sort of attacking him just a little bit. How long will you say such things? Your words are a blustering wind. Does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? And so Bildad is, I think, Job is saying, I haven't done anything, right? And so, and what we saw Eliphaz doing was Eliphaz was like, well, obviously you're not innocent. And so something has gone wrong. And if you just turn back and say all these great things to God, then God's going to turn back and give you a whole bunch of good stuff. And he says that's essentially not what's going to happen. And then he yells at God just a little bit, and he's upset and he's wishing for death. And then so then Bildad is sort of saying, you're a blustering wind, you're a blowing wind, you're wrong, and that God is not perverting justice, and he's doing what is right. And then he follows up and says, when your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of sin. So again, we're seeing this vision over and over again from strongly from Eliphaz and from now from Bildad, that what you do is in how God responds. So if you do good, God responds good. If you do bad, God responds bad. And so they are saying these things over and over again to Job, and that's not even why we saw that God allowed Satan to do anything that he was doing. He never said that there was anything wrong with Job. He just said, did you see my servant Job? So that's sort of in that section of 2 through 7. And then I want to move down to verse 20. And in verse 20, he says, this is Bildad again speaking to Job. He says, surely God does not reject one who is blameless or strengthen the hands of evildoers. Now I want to go back because in Job 1, so in Job 1, we see it's Job 1, verse 8, and it says, the Lord says to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright. So God recognizes that Job is blameless and upright. Bildad has no, Bildad doesn't know this. Either as the reader, I can see this, but Bildad doesn't see this. But Bildad says, God doesn't reject one who is blameless. So Bildad has got it a little bit wrong, right? So he's twisted things a little bit. And again, he's blaming, he's saying God did this because you have done something wrong, because God surely isn't going to do anything to someone who's blameless. So we need to be careful of some of the things that we think and some of the things that we say. I want to move on to Job 9. And in Job 9, Job is replying to what Bildad said. His first verse in verse 2 is, he says, indeed, I know this is true. How can mere mortals prove their innocence before God? So now Job is thinking, how can I prove my innocence to God? What can I do to prove that I'm innocent to him? He said he's unable to do so. And so he moves on to say that he can't do it. But then he talks about the wisdom of God and the great power that God is, and all that God is and all that God does. Here we go. In verse 9, he says he's the maker of the Bear and the Orion, so the star systems, the Pleiades and the constellations of the south. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed. So he goes on and on about the immense greatness of God, which each one of these we can take some time in, I think, and really study the beauty of who God is and the great power and the greatness of who God is. But he's saying it, basically saying, how am I supposed to prove that I'm innocent? Look at this. This God is so big and he's so much. Verse 14, how can I dispute with him? How can I argue with him? If he said, though I'm innocent, I can't answer him. I only can plead for mercy. But it also says that if he does ask him, then God's going to crush him with a storm. So again, he's, I think, misrepresenting who God is because he's so upset about what has happened. He's now starting to misrepresent and misunderstand. And even as I'm saying this, it brings me all the way back to the garden in Genesis 1, where God is misrepresented, where God says to Eve, does God really say? And she said, we can't eat it and we can't even touch it, right? So she is already misrepresenting who he is. And now we see that Job is also misrepresenting who God is. So I want to go to verse 22 through 24. This is where it starts to get a little shady, I think, for Job. He says, it is all the same. That's why I say he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When a scourge brings sudden death, he mocks the despair of the innocent. When a land falls into the hands of the wicked, he blindfolds its judges. If it is not he, then who is it? So we have this tiny little section that says God destroys the innocent and the wicked. And not just that, but he mocks the despair of the innocent. If we have a God that is so good and does all of these things, he can't be the same God who mocks the despair of the innocent. That's not the kind of God that we have. He doesn't wish us harm. And I'm going to say these are things sort of taken out of context by some of the things that I know in the future. So I want to be really careful, because just reading this, it's hard not to believe that these things are true. But again, if we go back to what God said, God did not say Job is innocent and therefore let's destroy his life. All he did was he just asked Satan if he had seen Job. So it was the only thing that he asked. And I don't think he is mocking and despairing, but hopefully we're eventually going to hear from him. And right now we're just hearing from other people. But I think Job is just turning a little bit dark at this point, and he's starting to think things about God that I don't believe are true, and that I think we're going to see are not true. So now in 25 through 31, he's saying his days are swifter than a runner. They fly away. They skim past. He dreads all his sufferings. I know I'm already found guilty in your eyes. And so he's just, again, he's sort of like lamenting and he's mourning and he's very sad. And then in verses 32 through 35, he says he's talking about God. God is not a mere mortal like me, that I might answer him, that we might confront each other in court. If only there were someone to mediate between us, someone might bring us together and remove God's rod from me. So he is terrified, and he's terrified of what God is doing right now. And I think why. So I think in a way, he might be trying to understand who God is. And he's saying, I'm really not big enough to confront him and to ask him these things. But if only I had a mediator, if I only had somebody in between that could help sort of assist between the two of us. And right now, all he's got is his friends. And what they're all doing is they're all sort of turning inward, and they're blaming actions instead of really even talking to God. I mean, they're not even lifting up in prayer. Job was lamenting to him and sort of despairing to him, but he's not really asking him why or what or how. So he's not really trying to have any kind of conversation with him yet. I don't know if we're eventually going to see that, but that's where we are now. And then we're going to go into Job 10, where again, he's verse 1, he starts with, I loathe my life. He's complaining, he's bitter, he's sad, he's angry. Verse 8, it says, your hands shaped me and made me. Will you now turn and destroy me? Again, it's a recognition. He knows who God is, right? So let me rephrase that. He knows there's a God, and he knows God has done certain things, right? He knows God is big. He knows that God is bringing up my own story. I remember this is after COVID, the time that I'm filming this. And so we, depending on when you see this, we went through a sickness in the world, and the world essentially shut down. And I am not one to handle things like that really well. So I really struggled with being away from people, and it was really hard for me. I am extremely extroverted. I like to talk. I like to be around people. I like to, that actually engages me, and it gives me a little bit of life. And so when we went into this shutdown for 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, it was really problematic for me emotionally. And I remember at this one point, we were starting to get back in, and I remember being in my car and just being just so angry that this was happening. Like, why are the roads empty? Why am I going to a place and there's only, 3, 4, and 5 people there? Why are we still covered in masks and not really able to have communication with each other? And I was just really angry, and I didn't know if God, and I still don't know, did God do this? Or did God, much like this story, did God allow this to happen? Is there something good that was supposed to come of it? Either way, we were supposed to be worshiping the Lord. So either way, I believe we were supposed to be giving praise to the Lord. But I don't know. I don't know if God did it. I don't know if he allowed Satan to do it. And I don't know if it was just a part of the world that is broken. There is disease, there's famine. As I said yesterday, the soil, the ground is no longer as perfect as it used to be. So I'm not sure which one of those things caused this situation. Even we as broken people, right? Our flesh, maybe we caused it. So I'm not really sure where it came from. But what I do know, and what I knew at the time, is that God is bigger than that. So God is was bigger than COVID. God was bigger than the shutdown. God was better than all of those things. And really only God could heal this situation. And I still think there's a lot of brokenness here, but God is the one that heals. And in my mind, I had a recognition that God was doing all those things. But in my mind, I was also so angry. Like, I just was angry. Like, I know you're so much bigger, but I'm still so mad. So I didn't have a sense of relief that I knew that God was bigger and that God could control the situation. But I had a recognition that he could. So my relief wasn't there yet. So I'm saying all these things because I feel like that's where Job is right now. Like, I feel like Job knows God, and yet he's still so angry. He's wondering why. I was good, I was blameless, uh I was blessed. There was so much prosperity in my life. And so what did I do to cause this situation? I know you are so big, and I know that I am so small, and I know that you watch me, but why is this happening, and how can I fix it? And I don't know if he knows how he can fix it. So and he can't, by the way. He doesn't have the power to fix. He has the power to pray, but he does not have the power to fix. So I feel like that's where he is, and that's where he's stuck, and that's why he keeps getting frustrated. He feels like he's not big enough, or there needs to be somebody to help in between. And he's full of shame and anger and frustration. And so, and even when we go to verses 18 to 22, he's just wishing for death. He's just let it be over. Let my life be over. I have nothing and no one left. So then we move to verse, and this is another, I'm so sorry to say, it's another sort of like depressing episode, because we're still in this struggle that Job has in his life. And I just want to move on to verse 11. This is now his third friend, his friend Zophar, who replies. And so now we're meeting the third one, and we're going to see if he says anything any different than the other two, which is essentially, if you did better, you would have better. Or if you do better in the future, maybe, you'll get rewarded for doing better in the future. So here we go. He starts out frustrated with Job. Um, uh, so Zophar says in verse 2, are these words to go unanswered? Is the talker to be vindicated? Will your idle talk reduce others to silence? Will no one rebuke you? So he's definitely frustrated with Job. He's frustrated with the way that Job is responding. And he even says in verse 6, know this, God has even forgiven some of your sin. So I think he starts out pretty well. And then verse 13 says, if you devote your heart to him, so here's where I think it goes funky. If you devote your heart to him and stretch out your hands to him, and if you put away the sin that is in your hand and allow no evil to dwell in your tent, then, free of fault, you will lift up your face, you will stand firm and without fear. You will surely forget your trouble, recalling it only as waters gone by. Life will be brighter than noonday, and darkness will become like morning. You will be secure because there is hope. I think those words, while they seem poetic and lovely, I want to say that as somebody who suffered all this tragedy, that's probably pretty brutal. And I actually don't necessarily think it's true. Um, we're not there yet. And so I hate to bring up something in the future, but there's this psalm that is in the future that we will read. And hopefully I'll remember this once we get there. And there's no hope at the end. So he just is lamenting the whole time. And at the very end, that's how it ends. It doesn't say, and then he was so hopeful because God saved him, or God protected him, or God gave him back this, that, or the other. Job lost everything except his wife. I'm going to continue to reiterate, except his wife, but his wife wanted him to throw away God. So Job lost everything, and then his wife wanted him to throw away God. The only person left, and she wanted him to throw away God. He may never recover from this. He may always, and probably had always warned, um, always mourned, always mourn all of his family that was lost. Even if he wins $1 million tomorrow, he will mourn that family that was lost. That will never make up for the losses that he has had just had happen to him. So I don't think we can say to somebody, if only you turn your face to God, everything will be great. The beauty is that God is real, and that God is there, and that God is your hope, and he is your security, and he is your love, and he is right. He is all of those things, but there is still mourning on earth because this is not our home. And so Job is not in his home. And so there will still be mourning here. Yes, he should turn his face to the Lord, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everything will be bright and shining like who is it Zophar has told us. And so I want to leave it there. Um, I think that we will we will hear from all of them again, and I'll be interested to hear what they have to say in the future, if they start to change some of their ways and some of their thinking, or if they stay in this sort of prosperity style of if you're only good, then everything will be great kind of situation. Um, and so that is it for today. Again, ending a little bit more on a darker note. However, God is still good and he is still there for all of us, even in our sad times. He is there just to listen and to hear and to be our God, even through all things. So tomorrow we will be reading Job 12. We will be starting in Job 12. I want to give you the exact one just in case you don't have your plan. Tomorrow we will do Job 12 through 14. So we're going to just, again, we're continuing on in the book of Job, and I'm hoping that it won't bring us down too much, but we're continuing the book of Job. If you have found this a blessing, if you enjoy the podcast, I want you to like, subscribe, share it with lots of people. Keep reading. Stay in your word and lean on God in all things. Make sure you are praying before and after your reading time, so you are in relationship with God as you read. I just want to thank you again for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow.